Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Welcome to another episode. In my work, I've had the honor of helping families choose a senior living community to live in. It's a huge decision and one that often comes with a lot of emotion, guilt, fear, confusion, anxiety. I've toured quite a few places with people I support, and some were truly beautiful where I remember thinking, I'd love to live here someday. And then there were others where it felt like the spirit of the place had already given up. You could just feel it, like people went there to wait to die. That contrast is real and it matters. So, how do you tell the difference? What questions should you ask? What signs can help you know if your loved one will be truly cared for or just managed? My guest today is Angie Graham, Division President of Our House Senior Living and host of the We're Talking About It podcast. She brings years of experience and a big heart to this work. In our conversation, we'll talk about the good and the bad and how families can make more informed choices. So grab a warm drink, find a comfortable seat, and join us for the conversation. Angie, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So let's start with your story. What drew you to work in senior living?
Well, my story starts as a family member navigating that journey. My father had young onset dementia, and it was just such a shock to our family when we found ourselves looking for a safe place for him because being at home had no longer been safe. And so we found a memory care for him, and he lived out the last 2 years of the disease in a memory care. And it was there that I got introduced to, I didn't even know what memory care was. Um, I knew that Alzheimer's was a thing, but I just never thought it was something that was going to touch our family, and especially with my dad being so young, he was 57.
Mm.
And so, when he got his diagnosis, and so, uh, going to a memory care and bringing him there, um, so many emotions as you talked about. And then jump ahead to many years later, I was at a pivotal point that I just wanted to make a career change, and I still remember that bond of being in the memory care and the people that were there. And on a side note, I was actually afraid of the elderly. I grew up without grandparents. And so to all of a sudden be surrounded by the elderly in a memory care setting, I remember my first time being there, it was fear, honestly. And then I just became very much loved the people that were there. And when my dad, in his illness, couldn't always sit with me, there was always another resident that would. And they just thought you were their family too. And it became, you became family to all the residents there. Because when someone would walk in, you were family to all of them and they'd all want to come and sit with you. Or some of them would. My dad, he wandered a lot. So he was on the move a lot. And so I built then relationships with other residents that were there when he didn't have the capacity to sit with me that day. And so for many years, I just wanted to make sense of why this happened to us or why we had this experience. And then I entered into the assisted living world as a marketing person. And I thought, well, I can relate to other families. And it was more purposeful work than what I had been doing. So that was 16 years ago.
I'm kind of curious, what had you been doing beforehand?
I was working in real estate, for 8 years. I sold real estate, and that was a great rewarding job too, just a little different than working with families, I would say. It's definitely more emotionally charged working in senior living and working, with families than when you were just, I don't wanna say just selling houses, but, there was some emotion that went along with that, but definitely a different type of business, and the sales part is different.
Yeah, yeah. Especially, I know that where you live, our house, is a bit smaller and
Yeah,
nonprofit, and so it's much
a
more
lot of rural areas.
so it's much more, it's almost family. Like I have uh, taken and, as I said, toured lots of facilities in the Bay Area, and I've toured everything from the really large corporate owned and the smaller, one senior living community, community. And there is a big difference with how even sales is handled. It's
Hmm.
really interesting, and we'll go through a little bit later the
Sure.
differences between these communities and what we should be looking for. Um, but in your job as division president of Our House Senior Living,
Hmm.
from a day-to-day perspective, what does your role look like, and what are you most passionate about in your work?
Sure. So at this level, probably one of the things that I take most seriously is I set the stage for all of our locations. So we have 31 locations. So I set the culture of the organization. I set the goals of the organization,
Mm,
and I do take that role pretty seriously. I don't get to interact as much with residents in this role as I used to when I was on site more often. But it is a very important role because that culture and wanting our residents to be well taken care of. And like I said, our business is in smaller locations, so our reputation is everything. So it's really important that we do a good job, and not that things don't happen. Things can happen in business, but it's how we react to it. It's how we communicate. It's how we talk to our families. All of those things that go together. So our culture is very family orientated. When someone joins our organization, we say, "Welcome to the family,"
mm,
um, because these communities are so connected to the community. It's the clergy, it's the family that owns the funeral home. It's um, the people down at the clinic. It's all intertwined together. So we want to do a good job. I want to hear. I want to see those cards from the family that say thank you
mm.
for for doing a good job, and those are all very important to us. And we get far more of that than we do, if something unfortunate happens, for example. And those are all the things that many providers get that the public never gets to hear about. And unfortunately, the public always gets to hear some horror story that is not an industry norm, but they pick it up on national news because this or this happened. And the one thing that I really advocate too is our caregivers aren't forgiven or are not forgotten in all of this, and that they um, do a really good job with our residents on a daily basis.
Mm.
They become those residents' extended family, and those residents depend on them for those services. And if we don't have people providing these services, this is where we start to fall apart. And we've really worked to advocate to give a good message for what we're doing and give our caregivers recognition for what difference they make for our residents.
There's definitely a caregiver shortage. How do you support your caregivers to ensure that they're taking care of themselves and taking care, of course, of your residents?
Well, our biggest responsibility as um, healthcare management professionals is to ensure that we are properly managing our team and we're not putting them in a situation that's going to burn them out.
Mm,
So we work in areas where staffing agency is not even an option. So we have to ensure that we have caregivers all the time. And so managing the overtime, and when we get into those situations that we can quickly turn it around. What we find is caregivers are willing to work extra hours. They're just not willing to work extra hours every week of every month of every year. So they need to know that we have their back and that we're working really hard to get someone in there as quickly as possible for them so they're not put into those situations. The other thing is with caregiver burnout, too, especially with dementia, is managing those residents that have dementia. So, unfortunately, with dementia, you can have a resident who's never had aggressive behaviors in their life, but in the disease, we have to remember it's the disease, it's not the person. All of a sudden, they can become very angry, and they don't even know why they're very angry. It's a progression of the disease. So it's our responsibility with our nursing staff and communicating to physicians to address those, and we call them behaviors. I kind of, I hate that word because again, it's the disease, it's managing the disease. But so managing those behaviors that they're exhibiting so it doesn't come out onto those caregivers to where they're trying to work with someone who's doesn't understand what may be happening, and so they're becoming combative. And so those situations too is keeping our caregivers safe in the workplace and really addressing the symptoms of the disease and being on top of those things is also really important. And we have a nursing team that will respond very quickly when we have these things going on, and they work regionally to ensure that's happening. So the nursing shortage is very, very alarming for caregivers because it's those RNs that are in those long care settings that can address these things and um, with the doctors and be on top of what can be a very stressful workplace for caregivers. So we have a lot of caregivers that'll come to us from other places, and they will say that we're better managed.
Mm,
They feel that right away. So it comes down to you have staff, if you can manage a workplace, that they can feel fulfilled within, and that's really the key. And we manage around 600 employees, and we do not use staffing agency
mm,
anywhere within
love
our
that.
organization. And it really comes down to management. It is on us.
Thank you. Now you
Hmm.
mentioned memory care. So senior living is really used broadly, right? And
Hmm.
many of the people who listen to my podcast are people who have parents who are starting to go through the senior living process, and they're not
Yes.
familiar. And many haven't heard terms like memory care. Can you help us understand some of the different types of care settings? Can you define those for us?
Sure. So there's a wide array of different care services, and it can start from at home care to senior independent living, which they may offer lunch or housekeeping services. They kind of have an a la carte to apartments where they do all three meals and laundry services to then assisted care and memory care. So typically, residents that don't have cognitive issues prefer not to live with people because you're talking about communal living, prefer not to live with individuals with memory care. So, and people with memory care need specialized services that are different from people that maybe are just having decline from a physical standpoint, but they still have most of their faculties. So, we have designated and memory care, and most memory care settings, and I'm speaking broadly, have some sort of wander guard in place so that there's either alarms or things like that, so if the resident leaves the building, they're notified. So for safety measures, there's a different, standard there for people that have cognitive decline. And then assisted care, what we call assisted care, individuals that don't have the cognitive decline, but we can manage their care within assisted living. Um, every state regulates this differently. In our state, it's based on hours of nursing. So if they need certain nursing, it can be uh, like feeding tubes, for example, in our state. If someone needs a feeding tube, that's then a nursing home or skilled care they would go to get those services. So it just depends on if they fit the program of services for within that building, and every state regulates that differently. So there's usually different care settings depending on what you're looking for.
Thank you.
Mhm.
When families first start looking at options, what do you find are the most common misconceptions or surprises that they encounter?
Um, I think that not all assisted livings are the same, that and I think also understanding and having realistic expectations of what that looks like. I can say that my dad was in memory care 25 years ago, and it's different now than it was 25 years ago. Um, because of the caregiver turnover, um, because of um, you're seeing more younger people in memory care too. So I think that the industry has changed and understanding what to expect when you go into communal living. That can be a shock to someone who's been at home in their own home for a long time. You may expect your loved one to say they don't like it here. It's a transition. We say it takes about 30 days for someone to start to transition. Um, so, you know, it's a whole different world, and I think just going through this personally with my mom, because she now lives in one of our buildings, is that things that I forgot about with my dad too and transitioning someone is just what to do with her stuff, what they're gonna wanna take from what they really need. Um, they don't need a whole lot, but my mom was not willing to give up a lot. So that was a transition for her is, not having her beautiful dishes or not having things that she'd always had. She doesn't crochet anymore. Do you still need the yarn? It's all of those things that you forget that the morning that she went through of having the loss of her stuff. That was a transition for us in the family that I think we underestimated. We just sort of thought, "Oh, we'll pack her a suitcase," and I think families think that, and you're gonna show up with your loved one, and, it's definitely a very emotional time, and then some family members too are in a bit of denial that, "Why do we need to do this? Why can't mom live at home yet?" So I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and so there's 6 other opinions. And every time somebody visits the location and they see something, guess who they call? So that's 6 different phone calls that I may be getting of why is this and why is that? So it is understanding that some of the things that facilities do are regulatory. They have to. Um, one of the first things my mom called me with is, "Why do we have to do this fire drill thing? It's loud. Nobody likes it. Why did we have to do that?" And that was one of her first complaints was the fire drill. Something I hadn't even thought of, honestly, that, yeah, we have to do fire drills. That's a regulatory thing. We have to make sure the fire alarms are working. Um, so, it's things that even I had forgot about that we do that you don't do at home. You don't do fire drills at home. And usually, if your fire alarm is going off, there's a good reason for it, or it needs a battery. Whereas that's something here, regulatory wise, it has to be done monthly. So you can just expect a lot of different things from going into communal living than what you would deal with at home.
And I love how you start off with talking about communal living, how it's changed, in the 25 years since your mom has been or was in the senior care. I worked at a senior community when I was in high school a long time ago. And with touring places, there is the odd place that is like where I worked when I was a teenager, right? That's I think what many people envision when they envision assisted living and senior care. They get really nervous, like it is a place to go to die. where in today's world, senior care, senior communities are, some of them, the majority of them that I visited have been amazing, have been places where I would not mind living, um, because they are communities. It is, places they're apartments, most of them, and it's
Mhm.
not like
Yes.
what you see in the movies or what you saw 25, 30 years ago. Uh, so it
Yeah,
is very
they're
different.
not buildings that are painted all the same color with rooms with curtains in and, yeah, it's totally different, and, um, they are very home-like, and you actually strive to not be institutional because people don't want that. Um, the other unexpected thing from my mom's standpoint is she went from being at home, kind of a pretty quiet life and maybe even a little boring at times, just doing the same things all the time, to going there. And with, of course, you put a group of people together and there's always something. She's, I don't want to say gossip, but they're always keeping up with what each other are doing. And it's really comical to hear her, talk about that she looks forward to going down to the dining room just to see what's going on today, like, who is doing what and, who's gonna sit with who. She says, "I don't know what's going on." She's 87. She's like, "I don't know what this woman has. She's 94, and she's got 3 men sitting with her at lunch." And this is the I kinda chuckle, and she's like, "I don't know what she's got. I'm gonna have to find out what perfume she's wearing because no one wants to sit at my table, but she's got the 3 men over there sitting with her," and it's really kind of comical, but she looks forward to this as to what's going on in the building, and then I find several residents, they're all kind of the same way, and then they talk about this or that or, so yeah, that takes on a whole new life, and it's a bit of excitement that she has that she didn't have, living at home, and she'll call us kids and tell us stories about, who's doing this and this resident's doing that, and or the entertainment they had that day, and so it is a completely new life that she has gained there that she had to adjust to. But now and some days she's tired of it, sometimes she's like, "I wanna go out for lunch and get out of here for a while." Totally understandable, we all wanna get out of our house and do something different. But at the same time, we're out to lunch and she's talking about, "Well, I wonder what happened at lunchtime today. I'm gonna have to go back and ask, so and so." So, it is good to see that because then when she first went there, there was some depression. There was some things of her life was never gonna be the same, and there was that transition time, and I remember always telling families they will go through that transition time, but then it was a good reminder when I went through that with my mom that, yes, it's a transition time, and there's a lot of highs, and there's some lows that go along with that as well, and the big thing was just encouraging her that, "We'll get through this, it's just a different chapter, but you always have someone around," and she loves the visits. She gets visits all day long. The housekeeping comes, even when the maintenance guy comes in to check on her, and she has him changing batteries in like her items, which that's not really the maintenance. He's there to check the apartment, but all of those visits mean something to her. She thinks maintenance means maintaining anything that she owns personally, which is that's fine too. He'll put batteries in whatever she's got there. That she had this frog that croaked when people walked by it, so the batteries died. So she had him working on the frog. Um,
Those things are important.
whatever. If that's great.
People don't realize how important being social is, especially as you get
Mhm.
older. And I've seen, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people move to these communities because their world has shrunk quite considerably as it does when you leave the workplace, right? You retire
Mhm.
and um, and you get older and your friends start passing away, your friends start dying,
Yeah.
and your family also. So the social aspect of living in a community is really important. Also, I've seen people whose spouses are need that extra care, and I always say that you could be a husband or you could be a caregiver. You can't be both. And same,
Right.
you could be a wife or a caregiver. You really can't be both. And when I say caretaker, I'm not talking about, oh, every now and then you're doing some light help. I'm talking about when your loved one needs constant, needs that extra care, needs help bathing, needs, these type, getting up. Um, so it's really difficult. And living in a community like this um, is very, very helpful because you can be social and you can get that extra help, and then you can be that husband or wife and really focus on that role.
Absolutely, and as family members, I get to go there and be the daughter and not the caregiver. But, sometimes I'm also navigating her input, so now she has a direct client, and I appreciate that because if she tells me, "I think we could do better doing this or that, or you should look at this or that," it's been beneficial, honestly. It is like, "Oh, I haven't thought of that. Yeah, we could look at that." Whereas other times it's a bit, like, "Oh, mom, I don't wanna talk about work today. Let's just talk about other things." But, yeah.
That's great. Uh, what are some of the best things you've seen in senior care? What does it look like when it's done right?
Compassionate and loving. I think that's when you know you've done it right, and the thing I think people don't always think about when it comes to caregivers is they're not a caregiver because the pay, you know, is outstanding. I mean, let's call it what it is. Our caregivers don't get paid enough, but at the same time, this has to do with Medicare and Medicaid and all these standards that are set for healthcare. And people are caregivers or they choose to be caregivers because they're called to do that. They have a level of compassion to take care of others. And so when they can focus on doing that, that's the reward for them is feeling when they get that smile from the residents or they feel like they've done something that they've contributed in that way. Um, so that's why it's so important not to overwork or put our caregivers in stressful situations because they're also navigating the loss of these residents. So the business side of it is that we are in the end of life business. It's an important job that someone needs to do to ensure that residents maintain their dignity, that they have compassion during that last stage of their life. And there's so many parts to this. And we work closely with hospice too. And hospice is able to provide services that even we can't. So when hospice comes in, and the chaplain comes in and music therapy comes in and all of those things for people at end of life. I mean, all of those things are so important. But being a part of that as a caregiver, that you can feel like you gave that gift at the end of life, compassion um, and be there for residents. That's the reward in it, but they also go through a mourning process too when someone passes away, and that's why it's important the chaplain comes in, and there's been many times where I've been in buildings and someone has passed away, and they cry together. They mourn that loss together. So, um, it as it's just kind of beautiful to see when it's done right, as so often we think of death as such a negative thing, but it can be also a really beautiful thing when it's done right and the family is there and you're surrounded by all of that love and compassion and people there to support the family because death is really part of life. And none of us get out of here, right?
Yep, yep. So
um,
So I know that, you're taught there are people who go into senior care that are there for many, many years, not just the final stages. When um I know, as some of the people I work with, a lot of families I work with, they're their children who are calling me and asking me to help them with their parents. And so we're going on all these tours.
Mhm,
What are some of the things, if I'm looking with a family, there's good and there's red flags, right? And some
mhm.
of them, it's like how many caregivers per resident, and how many nurses are on site at a time. And there's, like, what are things people should be looking for, not only in staffing, um, but in just the community itself, the facilities. What should people be looking for to, and what are some of the red flags where if I see that, this is a definite red flag?
Well, I think you just gotta do your research. In our state visits are public information, but you gotta go out and look at that. You gotta see if they've been deficiency free. You've gotta see when was the last state visit. Google reviews, what are other families saying about them? And I think when you walk into a place, does it feel cold and sterile, or is it warm? Are the caregivers smiling? Are they happy to be there? What does that look like? I would definitely sit in on an activity. Bingo seems to be one of the most popular ones, but um, how are the residents? How are the residents when you go in there and you look? Do they look like they're cared for? Um, there's just a lot of environmental things that you can. Is it clean? How does it smell? All of those things indicate um, how the how the facility is being run. How long has the leadership been there? If the leadership's been there 3 months, there's a lot of transition that's going to be going on, and some of that can be very good though too. Sometimes leadership changes can be a very, very good thing, but do know if the leadership is fairly new, there's a lot of changes that are going to be happening there. Um, so many indicators, you just have to do your homework. Nowadays with digital marketing, it's much easier to do your research because you can go out and look at Google reviews. And if you are in a good place, leave them a Google review. If you're happy with your current place, there's a lot of families out there. Let other families know that, hey, I found a good place. Um, do they have active social media? That's becoming more and more of a thing. Places that don't have active social media, do they not want to? Why is it so private? Is there a reason for that? Some states, though, there's privacy reasons or company policies why they do that. We're a very transparent organization with our social media, so people can see what goes on a daily basis within our buildings and that we're doing things with the residents or they went here today for an outing. Outings are another really important thing for residents. If they can still get out and about, that's something else that was really important to my mom. She was always a go, go, go person. So, here with our weather, we don't have outings in the very frigid part of the year just because of snow and ice and all of those things. So, April, she was all ramped up. She's like, "I cannot wait to go to Sassy Cow." I was talking to the girls and we're gonna be going to Sassy Cow. So even those simple things like that weekly or monthly trip or whatever it is, do they offer that? Not all places do. So having an idea of what is going to fit, because let's face it, not everything fits for everyone. So you want to pick a care setting that is going to fit for your loved one. So does it check the important things or what's going to be important to you and your family, thus your loved one? And then, there's going to be also family dynamics. There's people that just don't like senior living altogether, whether it's nursing homes, assisted livings, and, what part of that, what is the objection to it? That was some of it, even with some of my own family. They were just overcoming some of those objections amongst family members. What are the concern, and how can we all work together to make sure a loved one is in a place that's going to be the best for them? So, as you stated, there's so many different places. Is a smaller place going to be better than a big place? Are they going to be overwhelmed if they're with 80 other people, or do we need to find a place where there's 15 other people or 20 other people? So, all of those factors uh, play into it. After COVID, we found that people wanted to be in more smaller settings. And that was great for us because a lot of our buildings are smaller buildings. So they're 20, 24, um, 41 is our largest. So we really seen an uptick in families picking smaller locations. Um, you just have less people coming and going from the building, and so that was a plus. Whereas other people like the big campuses where they have the putting greens and the swimming pools and all of those things. So it just depends. Do you want to be in a resort, or do you want something more intimate? All of those are personal decisions, and now that's why it's changed so much in 25 years. That wasn't an option back then, and now you have senior care facilities that are like resorts.
Yeah.
So
Those are
yeah.
the places I was talking about when I was going through them, going, wow, I would love to live here. Um, I think one thing that's really important that some people don't realize is when you take and you go into these, most places have that variety of living where a person can be there from being in a senior living community through that assisted living, through, there's
Mhm.
memory care, there's a so there's that whole line going through your life cycle. And some places do make you move apartments if you're, totally, free. You don't need assisted living. And then when you need a little more assisted living, you go into another area. I think it's
Mhm.
important that uh, people have that discussion or realize and ask that question. Hey, can I remain here um, from being really healthy and not needing assisted living to, can I stay in the same apartment when I need some extra help through hospice? Yeah, I
Mhm.
want to stay in this is my home now, my apartment. Is that a possibility? So that's one thing to be aware of. And that's separate from memory care. I understand memory care is a real um, special situation. And I know that we have to do it better. I know that we will do it better. We're learning. Um, but what are some of the other questions that people should ask? Are there like a top five when you're talking to families or you're advising people that people should ask?
I would ask about longevity. Like, what's your longest staff member here? There's usually you want to you want to find some core staff that have been there and there's some longevity there. That's usually a good sign. How long has the director been there? Um, Whoever's in charge, the healthcare management there, how long have they been there? Those are usually some good indicators of how stable the building is. Um, I would definitely ask questions about how, and usually they're quite structured. So how their structure looks. So what time is breakfast? What time is lunch? Do we have, what are the options if the resident wants to eat in their room, or can they, all of those types of things. What does the day look like here for the residents? So breakfast is served between here and there, and how is all of that gonna fit with your loved one? And just like you mentioned, care level, some of that can be regulatory. So literally for some, based on depending on the state, you're only allowed to have people that need so many hours of nursing in some settings and they have to move to another one. And that usually has to do with staffing patterns. So, how the building is staffed. So, if your loved one is going to need more assistance, you're going to want them to be someplace where they can get more assistance. But sometimes they can stay where they're at with hospice services, and that all depends individually on the decline of that person. So even with us, we had some assisted care apartments, but our staffing patterns are different there. So it just depends on what care is going to be needed as to whether we need to transfer them across the campus to the assisted care, which is higher staffing ratio. And we're just able to provide services at a higher level there, which they get more personalized attention, which may be something your loved one needs. But yeah, I do think it's important to never promise anyone that they can stay in any setting forever, because everyone's decline is different and you just don't know. Sometimes they may have to go to skilled care. Most of the time, with hospice, we can manage till end of life most of the time, right? So there's always that small percentage that someone can decline and it's different for them, and they may have to go to skilled care. So you can never say, I've had families say, well, mom just never wants to go to a nursing home. Well, who can look into a crystal ball and predict that? You don't 100% know. We can do everything. We can try to do everything that we can to keep them here, but some of those are even out of our control because the regulatory requirements say that we can't do certain nursing things that that person may require. So
It's a very emotionally charged process, and families feel a lot of guilt over this. And I know, as you've mentioned, people who are actually going into the assisted living, that there might be fear and resistance. What advice do you have for people who are navigating the emotional side of making these decisions? Because it is, I mean, you don't want your emotions to lead, right? Lead this process.
well, just in life in general, some of the right decisions are the hardest ones. And it's not any different with your loved ones. Some of the right decisions are the hardest ones. And it is about having difficult conversations where you have to sit down with your loved ones. And that was the situation with my mom and my stepdad. My mom probably still could have been at home a little longer on her own. But when my stepdad declined, she couldn't be the caregiver. They were in their mid 80s. And so they moved together. And he passed away back in November. And then she had to make the decision whether she was staying. Well, by this point, we had sold the house, and so it just made sense for her to stay. She's now 87. And so it is about having those conversations and telling your loved one it's for the best. Now, you can't control how someone else is going to react to that, but you're advocating for them. You have the best intentions for them and you know it's going to be best for them. And, you know, what you don't wanna have to do is, and we've seen this happen where the families they don't have a good connection, they don't communicate well, and they just throw their hands up in the air and say, "I can't deal with mom or dad." And now a guardian has to step in, and someone's gonna make that decision if they're not going to be safe at home for them. So, then they have no control at all. So, it is about multiple conversations, and it is about doing what's right for your loved one. And even though they may be very resistant to it, because it's a very scary thing, they're giving up a lot to come to senior living. They're giving up, their home, their freedom, their, sit down and you think about everything that they give up to go there. And especially individuals that have been very controlled of their environment, they've been in control of that. It's really difficult. But ultimately, if your loved one is ill enough, they come to that. A lot of times they'll come to the decision together, as difficult as it is. And some of them have such grace about it too that I don't want the burden to be on my family. I know I'm going to need the help and they can't do it. And so it's just about having the conversation and it's about getting them there to look at what that looks like. Because, like you mentioned, they still think it's, They still think it's a place where all the wall colors are the same and it's very institutional, and they remember what it looked like when their parents were there in the '70s, for example, and we all know it looks much different now, and they don't know what that looks like. Some do, um, because they have friends that have moved there, and that's great if they've gone and visited. We have residents that come in and said, "Oh, yeah, my best friend is here," and it looks great, so those are really easy to transition. So, I think that the options today are much better than they were the previous generation for people, and I think they're gonna continue to, just with what is being built, there's amazing places for people to go to, and it's definitely not the institutionalized settings that we've seen in the generations past.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this also is having, as you said, having these conversations. We listed some of the questions that you should ask. You went over them, and some of those, you mentioned, hey, what does the schedule look like each day? What activities do they have?
Mhm.
And that is really personal. But these are conversations that you should be having with your family way before you even get there.
Yes.
I think it's very healthy. My parents have had the conversation of, here's the will, and they're far from death. But they've had the conversations with us about the will. We've talked to them about advanced directive stuff. Um,
Mhm.
and what do they want as far as senior living? And that's something that's best done with your children, uh, with your family way before you need to get there, so that people know. Because God forbid you don't have the capacity to make those decisions for yourself. At least your family, your loved ones know. And I would even document those also. Um, So another thing that I do, besides from having those conversations, is I have a checklist. When I work with people, let's go over what's important to you. What do you want your quality of life to look like? What are some of these things? Because as you've mentioned, activities are different between different senior living communities and schedules. What do you want your quality of life to look like? What's important to you? Make that list and then
Mhm.
compare. Um,
Yes.
I'm I hate to say I'm a spreadsheet geek, but I really geek out with spreadsheets. So I even have a spreadsheet that I use with people, and when we go to these communities, it's really uh,
And I think what you just mentioned too is talking about it ahead of before you really need it. And, you're starting to plant the seed, the loved one, that this may happen some people never end up in these settings. And some people, they just, they say lucky enough just to go quietly in their sleep, and they never end up in a senior living, right? Um, but if you do, what does that look like? And because I was in the business, I had talked about this a lot with my mom, fortunately, and just seeing dad go through that experience. So she had an opportunity to share a lot. But yeah, what does that look like? Or, hey, my friend just moved their loved one. It can be even having a conversation about somebody else, that you can start to have that conversation with your loved one. But you go home. I've seen it so happen so often where family members go home for Thanksgiving and they haven't seen mom, or they haven't visited her in 6 months, and they go home and all of a sudden they can tell by the condition of the house that something is off. Um, so it can happen that fast for family members. 6 months ago, she was doing pretty good, and now things have definitely changed. So thinking about those things, even as children, as adult children, thinking about that things could change for my loved ones, so that you're prepared for that to happen, because that's the aging process. Unfortunately, things continue to decline, and you have to expect that at some point you're going to have to help your loved one.
yep. Just a couple more questions. I know we're coming to
Sure.
the top of the hour. Now I know senior communities, some are corporate owned, nonprofit, some are privately owned, and I talked about that family feel of smaller facility, a
Mhm.
privately owned or nonprofit. I believe you're a nonprofit.
No, we're not.
No, I'm
We're
sorry, you're
for
for-profit.
profit. Yeah.
Um, do these differences of being privately owned, corporate, nonprofit, do they actually matter when it comes to quality of care?
To me, no. It's about, what the company culture is. Um, maybe another question to ask is what their mission statement is. What is their mission? Um, but ultimately, every even really large companies that have multiple assisted livings, they've hired that executive director to run that location. So it really comes down to the management, to me, at that location. Um, are they well connected with their staff? To what outcomes do they want here? And most of them are going to want a good work-life balance, and they're going to want happy families. You want all those things if you're running a location. So I'm sure that there's some influence on them from a corporate level, and hopefully their influence is a positive one because that's what they're going to pass on to the locations, obviously. But I've seen, you know, just in the years, I've seen nonprofits run it off in the ditch, just saying it what it is. Mismanagement is mismanagement. It doesn't matter whether you're corporately owned or nonprofit or, even small mom and pop owner. If you mismanage, that can happen at any level. Um, I think from us, people will say we're probably like a medium-sized provider. Um, I understand that having happy customers is an important part of the business. So we strive to do that. And so I don't know that it makes a difference from the standpoint of whether it's a large corporation, mom and pop operators. It depends. What's their intention? If you're money focused, um, eh, your outcome could be different. The it's what the focus is with the organization, but you don't have to work nearly as hard at it if you do a good job. That's just been my experience. It's a lot harder when you've got to overcome reputation issues and staffing, turnovers and things going on. It makes it a lot harder to run the business in that way. And even large companies or medium sized companies like us, um, that overall we do a really good job, but then you could have a location that struggled and you got to get it back on its feet. Like those things can happen just like that. And, how proactive have they been? Who's in there for leadership now? Um, so yeah, I think misman mismanagement is just mismanagement. It is about having people that can overall manage their operations and maintain a healthy workplace for the caregivers and the residents. So,
Two more questions. If
sure.
families are having a bad experience, how can families advocate for their loved ones if they're seeing things aren't going right? They've already complained
Mhm.
or brought up their concerns. What are some of the steps they can take?
As far as concerns go, you definitely want to go to the management and the location first, and then give them an opportunity to address it. And then ask them to, I think this is really important, of how they will follow up with them. Because sometimes, depending on what the complaint is, and there's HIPAA and there's things, you may not get the privilege of knowing exactly what was put in place. All the management may be able to say to you is we've put action steps in place, and so we're hoping that the issue has been resolved. But if you're seeing something that's reoccurring and you've gone to the management with the concern, there's usually an ombudsman or they're called different things in different states, but the how do you say, it's the person that will act as a in between the family and the facility, and try to encourage basically encourage communication and resolution to the problem. And then there's also the state. You can report to the state. Now, in our state here in Wisconsin and Minnesota that we're in, the state has been overwhelmed, and they are asking us as facilities to try to do a better job managing complaints. So families are very aware of how to go to the state, but the state really wants. So what was happening is that families were just direct lining to the state, and then the director of the facility may not have even known about the issue. So that's what you don't want to do. You want to make sure that you try to address the issue on site first, and then follow the steps. If it's not getting resolution, or if you're continuing to see the issue, then work it backwards. But I would keep a log of when you first talk to someone about the concern, what was discussed, and then what the next step is going to be. Sometimes we just expect someone's going to follow up with us without asking. And we should be asking, can you follow up with us? Or just saying, I'm just following up with a concern. There should be a follow up. And sometimes there's the assumption of we're not telling them anything, but keep in mind it's a healthcare setting. We can't share details about what happens. All we can say is we have addressed it. So keep that in mind too. I get families that think they should know every detail with everything, and we just can't share everything. So,
So I'm sure that listeners are curious about this. You mentioned before your mom, her outing, and you mentioned sassy cow. What is sassy cow? I'm so curious.
uh, it's a dairy operation that has like a storefront. So they are, of course, licensed, but they make their own ice cream. So they have the cows on the farm, and then you go to the farm and you visit the farm and the ice cream shop, or you can buy their milk, and everything is right there. And it's all like it's on the up and up, like they've got their processing and whatnot, but they do it all right there. But it's basically go have ice cream, and you would think that this was just the biggest event going to the ice cream shop, but that's what it is. It's a family-owned dairy who also then sells their own milk, so they milk their cows right on the farm, and then they process their milk, pasteurize it, and everything right there. And they have a little shop that they can go in. They love the orchards too. So those apple orchards in the fall, they love going there, and where they'll bake their own apple pies and have their desserts. And there's tables that they can just go and visit the orchard and that smell of the apples. And so we try to find outings for them that they would enjoy doing.
I would
So.
enjoy going to Sassy Cow too. In fact, I wish anyone from Sassy Cow, if you want to come over to California, we have lots of land here for you. So
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, Angie, thank you so much for being
You're
on
very
the show.
welcome.
Before we wrap up, how can more people learn about Our House Senior Living or get in touch with you with questions?
Sure. Our website is ourhouseseniorliving.com. We have 28 locations in Wisconsin, 3 in Minnesota. If you just want to go out, we have also managed about 25 Facebook pages too. Each location, each community has a Facebook page, and you can go out and visit us there and contact us through there as well. We're on Instagram, and then I also do the podcast. We are talking about it. Dot buzzsprout.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. Listeners, choosing a senior living community is never just a checklist item. It's a decision wrapped in emotion, love, and a deep desire to do right by someone you care about. My hope is that this conversation gave you not only helpful tools, but also the confidence to ask bold questions and to trust your instincts. You and your loved ones deserve to feel safe, respected, and supported. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.